So good afternoon. Great to connect with everybody and chat about one of my favorite subject, project management. But really thinking about, what are some of the things that in construction we need to avoid doing in project management to really be able to have a successful project. I mean, there's so many things that we talk about in project management of like things to do, but what are those pitfalls? What are the things that we need to probably try to be aware of? But before I start, a little bit about RedTeam. We're a collaboration platform that fall into those pitfalls, right? For commercial contractors, helping them manage their business, all aspects of their projects, measure profitability, tracking all documentation, financials, and making sure that all your teams, both internal and external, have access to the right information at the right time. But more importantly, we're born out of construction. So we're not software people that are telling construction people what to do. We're construction people that built the software to help us manage our projects and manage our company effectively. Actually, RedTeam was born out of direct need that Mike Wright had to run his own business. And the software grew and eventually became a software that is now serving hundreds of GCs across the nation. And tens of thousands of users. So it's been a really fun journey to be a part of. So let's think about what does poor management mean to you for a construction company, right? I mean, so when you don't have the right processes in place, how would that translate, right? I mean, you can see that guy on the right, it could be like, not having access to the cash you need when you need it, right? That's the pretty basic one. And so you start with like blown bids, right? You don't have a good process about tracking the documentation. You're building your bid with incomplete information, unvalidated information, or information that's being shared with your subs is missing data, whereby when you put your bid in, you actually can't deliver at that price. It's not uncommon that we talk to GCs and we ask, what is the first question you ask yourself when you win a job? And very commonly, the answer we get is, I wonder what I did wrong. And I look at where could I get myself in trouble. So clearly poor management could result in blown bids in terms of managing that process, that bidding process. Job delays, cost overruns, those are, the things that happen. I didn't track the timing of each sub properly. And then I'm bringing people on the job site out of sequence, or I'm not bringing the right person at the right time. I think about, the plumber comes in to do all of the installation of all the equipment, but the sinks are not in yet. So they gotta leave, right? Or the drywall is not where it needs to be, or there's other people on the job and they can't do their job. We actually have a GC, that's one of the RedTeam customers, who uses an RFI form, and they send it to their subcontractors, and it's a mobilization RFI. So their subs tell them, hey, how many vehicles are they going to have? How much space do they need? So they can actually look at when they bring the subs, are there going to be enough spaces, because it's they have a very tight job. And so they really need to consider how many people can be on the job site at the same time safely. And so it was part of like coordinating that effort. Another part of poor management is frustrated staff. High turnover in the company. It's not working. Everybody's always yelling. Everybody's reacting to the problem. It becomes a reputational issue for the company. Could actually become tough to hire people because now it's like, yeah, if you go for this shop, it's always a mess. Everybody's always in a bad mood, and there's always, people, yelling, basically. So, really think about, poor management. Sometimes we try to, think about it just on the job, but think about it in your business. What's the impact? And then what's the impact on you, let's say as a business owner, if you're one of the partners in the company, is there this fear of litigation, and what that looks like, it's not, am I afraid of a dispute? I mean, in construction, we all know disputes are kind of part of the job, they're gonna happen. The question is more, am I confident that I'll be able to defend myself if a dispute was to arise? If someone says, hey, you should be paying me extra for this, can you prove that you shouldn't? And when you ask for payment for something that you did outside the scope, can you prove that you did all the steps necessary to actually earn that payment? So this is what, fear of litigation is like, do I have the information I need to, state my case, basically? All of that, it becomes lack of trust, right? Both internal, the staff doesn't believe that the information they have is really that reliable. The customers lose trust in you, so then they check in all the time. They try to verify everything, and so it doesn't become trust and verify. It just becomes verify in order to catch whatever's been done wrong because they don't believe you're going to do it right. And then your subs, right? And then when the subs stop trusting their GCs, they also likely will stop bidding on your projects, or they'll stop bidding aggressively. Like I have met with some subs who have been very candid about, depending on who the GC is, I bid differently. I was like, is the scope different? He's like, no, same scope. And I was like, what? I'm like, well, we put a fee for the risk of doing business with certain GCs because we know they're going to screw things up. And we know we have some cost overrun because they don't run their projects the right way. So we charge more. And that becomes now the self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, I can't get a really solid bid, so I can't win the bid. And sometimes the lower bid wins, not based just on the bid is lower, but also it's lower because there's trust in the process on how the GC is running the job. So there's really material impact there. All of that, ultimately, it's, lost revenue, profitability erosion. That's pretty, a basic one. And then another really important one is there's no success story to share. Think about a project you're wrapping up. Would I brag about it? Like, would I use that as a reference? I actually had that personally on the project I was working on, and it was a hardwood project that was being done, and it was like a very classic hardwood, like a red oak, had to be sanded and refinished and all this process. And I walked the job, and I was not happy with the finishing work that was being done. They had just done a couple of coats of the finishing, but it didn't look good. I could feel it. It felt dirty. It felt like gritty. Like it didn't feel like this really nice smooth surface. So and some things didn't look right. So I called the sub and I was like, hey, can we talk about this? And he's like, no, everything's going great. And he's arguing with me that everything looks good, and I'm there, and it doesn't look good. I know it doesn't look good. And so eventually, after another day or so, he came back and he's like, yeah, I've taken a look, and now I got it. It's 100% perfect. So I went back to the job site, and believe me, nothing had been done. It was exactly the same. So I asked the sub, I was like, hey, can you come back to the job and call me from the job site? So he did, and he calls me. It was a few hours later. I said, can you walk the job site? Can you look at the jobs been done to date? He goes, yes. I go, would you use it as a way to show as a reference for someone that's looking to hire you? And without hesitation, he said, absolutely, I absolutely would. This is exactly my standard. I go, okay, great, you're fired. And that day I terminated the agreement. Why? Because at that point, like, I had to stop the damage that was being done on the job. Because if the owner had walked in and seen this, like, I would have owned the problem. So I needed to stay ahead of it, right? So really important to have success stories. In this case, it was the sub, right, that was not on top of it. But I need to be on top of the sub, and that was my job. So what does poor management looks like, right? What does it look like in real life? Generally speaking, relying on memory is one of those things that shows up. Really the advice is, track and document everything. And often people will tell me, well, it's a lot of work. I was like, okay, well, how much work will it be if you don't have the information when you need it? What's it going to cost you? So, try to, and you think about tracking and documenting, it's really who knew what when, who said what when. What did I say to my subs or to the owner that could be a contractual obligation, right? So make sure you track and document that information. So 6 months down the road, I have that information handy, right? So one of the risks is to rely too heavily on memory. Some people are already gifted, still risky, right? So, just be careful with that. Another process that we tend to see in what poor management looks like is, ad hoc processes. Hey, let's just do a quick meeting and just chat about it. And like, well, do you have a notepad somewhere? Yeah, we'll just, we'll just wing it, right? And it feels like you're winging every meeting. And so there is not this sense of accountability and this sense of structure that's established. And really, the advice is, try to plan things ahead, plan the meetings, be intentional, right? Sometimes if there's a question being asked, hit the pause button and say, well, I need to look at it, and don't answer right away. Like, we have this risk of trying to answer on the fly and rush that, and then it creates like unforeseen consequence. Yeah, sure, go ahead and move that door 5 feet, no problem, that's fine. And then all of a sudden someone else comes on the job and goes, well, yeah, but actually I've got this issue about where this door is and needed to be there for a reason. And you just say, that's fine, move it, but it's not fine, right? So, hitting the pause button sometimes allows you to go faster. Like I often see the whole, hurry up and wait. It really sometimes is like pause and move faster. The last one, but not least, and it's almost like relying on memory, but it's something that's more the human quality of how we tend to do things, is that handshake. Yeah, no, yeah, he's got it, right? Like, you need to cross that off your vocabulary, no matter how tight you were with the person. It's a risky practice. And here's why it's a risky practice. And I'm going to draw kind of a ugly scenario. So you've got this guy on the job site with who you've done business for many, many years. And he says, yeah, no, I got this. I'm not going to charge you to do this cleanup because, again, my guys didn't do a good job. And that person gets hit by a truck tomorrow morning. How do you prove that they agreed to do the work for free? Or how do you prove that they agreed to show up on this date? How do you document all this? It's really important, again, to have the discipline to document everything that's been said on the job site, so we have that as a reference. So really important to think about what that might look like on a day-to-day operation. Another thing to think about in the risk in managing a project is assumptions and expectations. To me, I equate assumptions and expectations to opinions. I mean, we all know the saying about opinions, right? I'm going to summarize it in more like, opinions are our single largest liability, and can you cash that check? Right? When I start managing from an opinion perspective, I'm not going to be doing checks and balances. So I'm not collaborating, right? If I assume my sub is capable of showing up tomorrow morning, but I haven't checked, and I start planning the day after and the day after and the day after based on that assumption, is it a risk I can own, right? And what does it look like if they can't? And do I find myself like scrambling? And now I've got to do all the other phone calls to reschedule everything else because that assumption was not accurate. Or the expectation that I said of what was a deliverable, right? So just, really be cognizant about, do we manage by opinion? Now, there's a big distinction between opinion and knowledge. There is expertise, right? There is your project managers, superintendents. There's things that they know, that they're professionals. They've done this for years, right? They know what's going to work. They know that tomorrow is not a good day to pour concrete because of the weather, right? I mean, those are things that are known. It's like, all right, we need to change that. Totally understood, right? So there's still this art piece that exists in there, but then it means also document that, right? And sometimes it's just, yeah, I'm documenting that my opinion is we're not going to take the risk because the chance of it, working out is very low. And so it's better not to go ahead and mobilize everybody to get this pour done today, when in reality, we have a 60% chance it's going to be a problem. We're not going to pour unless we have a 90-95% chance of everything working out exactly the way it's supposed to. So opinions, assumptions, expectations, try to catch them and see where they show up on your job site, and try to avoid them at all costs. Same thing with your construction team in the office and your accounting team, your construction financial team, where they think about, yeah, these guys are fine, they bill correctly, there's no issues, until there is one. Right? Always assume you have to verify the stuff. Trust and verify should be part of standard practice. So other things that happen, ineffective planning, right? Make sure to spend time and invest time into logistical challenges. We talked earlier about, the subs, how many trucks do they need? How many people are going to be on the job site? What's, practical, especially today with like COVID, it's getting trickier, right? How many people in each elevator trip can you consider, right? So there's a lot of factors now that are adding to the complexity of coordinating logistics on the job site. So, invest that time that you're saving, by actually having robust project management, and you're not spending so much time in other places, to invest that time into really thinking through the logistics. Address potential changes ahead. And what I mean by addressing it is not just, think about it. It's actually go, hey, listen, I think we could have something coming up here, and start preparing maybe your customer, maybe preparing your sub, and say, hey, heads up, there's something I'm seeing here that looks off kilt. We need to probably address that. So I'm going to do some due diligence on it, but maybe don't move too fast on this particular project because we may need to make a change here. And obviously you need to react quickly and be very intentional about this, right? Understand the constraints. Constraints can be a lot of things. I mean, in Orlando, we've got the I-4 being rebuilt, right? It's a constraint, right? It's a constraint because sometimes, you know, traffic gets stuck a lot longer. It's a constraint because at night the highways get shut down. So there's all this constraint that's being done on this project that they have to consider in advance, right? There's a whole industry of planners, right, that think about what do I need to know about maybe the route to bring this equipment to the job site? Is there mud I need to consider, and then these vehicles cannot get through, and so I need to actually plan for it and get gravel dumped on a certain spot. There's all these things that you have to really capture, and so ineffective planning is, you know, not thinking about this and winging it, and then you pay the price eventually. It's an inevitable outcome. Incomplete risk assessment, right? You know, I think in construction, we often work on short deadline with high performance. That's typically how construction works. What that means, it means, you know, you have to spend time, you know, doing very accurate risk assessment. What is at risk right now in this project? So, and again, in order to do that, you need to give your staff the time and resources to actually do it. And it needs to be intentional. Hey, have we assessed the risk around this event? You know, an example of this, we had a customer, they had a delivery for some metal beams. It was on the job site. There was like a big metal structure. And one of the risks that they had to consider was the delivery itself, right? They were close to a very high traffic highway. And there were some obviously very large trucks and a crane to move that equipment. And someone decided we're going to do it Saturday morning, so it shouldn't be a big deal. But they did not assess the risk of a cop showing up saying, you can't shut down those lanes. You got to leave the site. And so the contractor reacted, and they put the beams on a top of a parking garage, and then the parking garage had some structural issues. Now, I don't have to draw out the whole story, but clearly it created a lot of issues. Why? Because someone did not pause and say, hey, we have delivery coming on Saturday. What are the things we need to have in place in order to make sure that they have the time to actually deliver and put everything in the right place, the right way, so that we're not creating other unforeseen circumstances that would create issues on the project. So, you know, investing that time is really valuable. So here is two questions that I think every GC should be able to answer yes to. And if you can't, really think about, how could I get there, right? The number one question is, do I know that the people who need to know what they need to know when they need to know it? That was like, when I've managed projects, that was one of my biggest headaches. Do I know that the electrician knows that we changed the switches? Does my trim guy knows that we changed the profile of the baseboards? Like, and do they know at the right time, which is when they're ordering the wood, because maybe there is a lead time to consider. I mean, it's really important to think about, what do they need to know and when do they need to know it? The second question is, think about, in 6 months, will I be able to know that the people who needed to know knew what they needed to know when they needed to know it? This is where memory becomes a danger zone, right? You may remember in a week, but what about in 3 months and in 6 months, when now there's litigation that's happening, and how can you prove it, right? So being able to organize all that information in a way that you can actually use it for your business is really important. This is why project management is such an important function to successful construction companies. You know, this is why we built RedTeam. You know, it's a live platform, right? So this is not like a scoreboard. It's not like telling you, well, what happened in the past. This is a platform that's used to, you know, business development, you know, what projects are coming up, you know, bidding, estimating, all of that is part of RedTeam pre-construction. Your project management, managing your Gantt scheduling, all the communications ahead of the project. So you can actually, you know, think about RedTeam more as the playbook, that you know the moves to make, and based on the circumstances, you move the things and you say, hey, you know, this is what you need to do next, and this is what you need to do next, and this is based on what I know, because I have that information. Obviously, all that ties to your construction financials, you know, your budget, your construction payments, your change orders, making sure that you understand what you're responsible to pay for, and you're responsible, and you have the information on what you're supposed to be paid for, right? Have that completely organized and be able to transfer all that information at the end of the project successfully with an owner that says, I've got everything I need to know on this building, on this construction project that was completed. This is also why RedTeam, the construction platform, has been built largely around contract, Because what causes friction is the agreement, and are we living up to the agreements? Those expectations have been set. And the way to avoid, this expectation as an opinion is to say, contractually, this is what we agreed upon. It's documented. I told the sub to do this, and I'm going to document that into my daily report. So I know that on that day, I took a picture. This was dirty. I told the sub, hey, this is part of your scope, but you need to spend a day cleaning all this up because you've made a mess on the job site. And this is not something I want to pay you extra for, so you don't get to bill me extra for this. And it's documented, right? So making sure you have all that information. So all those contract documentation is really important. And so RedTeam is built around contract. So contract formation, contract management, tying the work to be done in the financials, all of that is completely, let's say, native to the application for RedTeam. As far as the problems we solve, right? Incomplete contract documentation, communication breakdowns, again, that ties back to, avoiding things that be done ad hoc, right? Poor documentation tracking, all the metadata, right? Like the whole, who knew what when, right? Do I know that people that needed to know what they needed to know in the past? But the best way to know that is look at the metadata. I sent you an RFI, and I know that on this day you opened it. I know that you saw it because I have proof, and I have your IP address, and you opened that document. RedTeam tracks all of this passively. You don't have to document it. It's just captured. And we've had that in real life where GCs have used that metadata as a way to defend themselves against litigation, or to play offense and say, no, that's on you, and here is why. This is when I sent you a 48-hour notice, and I see that you opened it on that day, and this is the RFI, or this is the issue that was discussed in the safety minutes meetings, or in the quality review meetings. Like all of that is organized and it's captured in the platform, and you know that the meeting minutes were not only memorialized, but they also were shared through our collaborative console, and they saw it. So there is no debate as to whether or not that happened, right? Which is, the fourth item in how problems we solve is this information silos that exist in construction. Does your team in the field have information that your team in the office should know? Is there information that your construction team in the office should have made apparent to the construction financial team so they know not to pay that bill, right? So how does that information flow correctly? What is the approval workflow of the invoices? How is that all organized is really mission critical, and this is what RedTeam does. So I hope this was a valuable conversation, that it helped you kind of think about some things in your business, and we really appreciate you joining us this week. So thank you so much, and I think it's next week or in 2 weeks we'll get back together and do another conversation about how we can help construction get there. Thank you so much.